Who hasn't heard of a mermaid having long hair? You don't hear of them with buzz cuts and mullets, right? You hear about the mermaid combing her hair. That's what they're seen doing in the folk tales. Hairweed refers to algae or seaweed. There's like 10 different kinds of algae in the water that are called mermaid's hair. When we talk about our hair, we sometimes say it's wavy, just like the water. We comb through the waves and we comb through our hair. When we say my hair is tangled, tangle refers to seaweed, tong. There's even a tongy from the same root word, and this is a shape-shifting sea spirit of the Orkney and Shetland Islands. This creature that was just covered in seaweed like a swamp thing. Keep in mind that a lot of these water spirits of Scotland originate from Old Norse words too, because the Vikings obviously have been around the Celtic world, and so it's not that surprising that their languages would blend. Another example of this is the Shupelti, which derives from Old Norse sea boy. Shupelti is a horse that's covered in seaweed, kind of like the Kelpie in Scottish lore, this horse that you find by the shore and it drags you in and drowns you if you try to get on it and steal it. Many of you have probably heard of mayweed, the Balder's brow. This is a flower in Scandinavia that is definitely named after the god Balder. But there's another kind of mayweed that is under the water called Laminaria hyperborea, also known by the common names of mayweed, sea rod, cuvee, redware, and tangle. There's that word again. Tangle comes from Old Norse tangi, which means a protruding point, and could be related to the English word tongue. So bear with me here while I connect these dots, because you're going to be hearing about the Laminariaceae family, and the Laminarias probably a lot in this video. And the Laminaria is a genus of brown seaweeds. Some of these are known as devil aprons, some are known as tangle, as you can see. Balder was the god of the beautiful, the wise, and the eloquent. He was slain by contrivance of the evil Loki, who placed in the hands of the blind Hoth a dart of mistletoe. In Teutonic mythology, Balder is the son of Odin and Frigg. Elaria esculenta means edible wings, and it goes by the common names of winged kelp, honeyware, merlin, bladderlocks, and dabberlocks. All these different spellings of a word that's like yabba dabba doo, it makes no sense. It makes more sense that it was balderlocks. As my dictionary claims, it could be a mistranslation of that. I'm not trying to conflate Balder to a mermaid like myself, okay? What I'm saying is there's a pattern cross-culturally, and that it's not that far-fetched if we have seaweed called Balder's locks, that there would also be other Nordic references. Maybe I'm just looking too deeply into this. Maybe, I'm reaching. But if I am reaching, at least it's with a mermaid's glove, which happens to be a British branched sponge. There's also mermaid's hair, a common blue-green algae, and mermaid weed. Cordyphilum here looks pretty scary, and I'm a landlocked mermaid, so I generally stay away from this stuff, but it's also referred to as dead man's rope and mermaid tresses. This sponge is called a Neptune's cup, obviously because it's shaped like a giant wine glass, and Neptune is the Roman deity of the sea. Even in modern times, it's easier for scientists to create references and species names based off associations that were already there. For example, the spring tide of the English River Trent is named Ager after the Norse personification of the sea. The Triton's horn is a Triton shell, and that is named after a demigod of the sea, the son of Poseidon and Amphitrite. Triton also had a sister, Benthesigme, ancient Greek for wave of the deep, which sort of reminds me of Norse lore, how Ager and his wife Rana also have 9 wave daughters. There's even a new movie, I think from Sweden, that's within the last few years called Blodagata. It's only like 4 minutes long, but it shows that her name Bloody Hair was translated over the centuries to sort of represent a vampiric, malevolent spirit that is out to get you. And there's really nothing to back that up. We don't know much about the Billow Maidens other than their names that are recorded in the Skald's Karpamál of the Prose Edda. I can already guess what people are going to say is, well, technically the Billow Maidens, Ager's daughters, were not considered mermaid creatures till much later. They were just personifications of the wave. Well, touché. Explain to me then how a wave has hair. Because these are still obscure names for waves that are up for debate. It looks like on Wikipedia that there's already a few theories about this. According to scholar John Lindo, the name bloody hair refers to reddish foam atop a wave. Scholar Rudolf Simek says that the name does not appear to be too appropriate for a wave, but perhaps it was supposed to convey the wispy, thread-like appearance of the water streaming from the crest of the wave. I just don't see how a wave with foam on top would look like bloody hair, or a regular wispy wave would appear to have red hair either. If I may put forth a theory of my own, I contend that they are both wrong and that bloody hair actually refers to what is beneath the wave. Red seaweed would look like flowing hair in particular waves. If we have seaweed that was possibly called Balder locks, it would make sense then if blodugata or bloody hair was also referring to seaweed as hair. This is all conjecture, but one thing I can at least verify for you guys is that red seaweed was in fact very important, if not considered sacred, to the Vikings. Dulse is Palmaria palmata, a red algae that often grows on the stems of oarweed, or Laminaria digitata. Dulse is a word that comes from Irish Gaelic, but in Old Norse, the Vikings would have called this seaweed soul. This word soul could have been like a lu, or another magical formulae. This, for example, rune laguz, of water. In reconstructed Proto-Germanic, the names of this rune could be lake or leek, lakaz, which is where we get the word garlic, right? A leek is a vegetable, so it's very strange if this magical rune, one of its names meant a vegetable, then it isn't that implausible that maybe a different runic formula like salu could be related to this Old Norse word for dulse, soul. Soul is actually mentioned in a saga with Egil Skallagrimsson, how he was dreary about life and depressed, thinking about giving up. His daughter tricked him into ingesting some dulse and then drinking some milk along with it, and he felt so invigorated that he got out of his slump and went on with life and ended up becoming one of the greatest poets of Iceland.
Viking ships, trading ships came to Iceland with all kind of goods they needed. And what the people at Iceland paid with was these seaweed dolls.
This podcast that I'm using a couple of clips from is called Exploring the Algal Links to the Vikings with Thorkill Johansson. And I'll put the link below. It's really fascinating. They go more in depth. I'm only kind of skimming through it here to further my point, but I had no idea how important dulse really was to the Vikings. I mean, they would use it as currency and trade with it, so it was actually even money.
You can live a whole day eating just 20 grams of dulse.
It's kind of like when Popeye would take his spinach and he'd be like, yeah, I'm ready to go now. Well, the Vikings did the same thing with seaweed. When they're on a long journey, it prevented scurvy, and it could be part of a daily diet.
The church started to wonder why will these people not be Christians? Why will they not come to our church? And then they started to analyze it, and they ended up thinking that the people living in Scandinavia were broths of the devil. And for what reason were they brought of the devil? Because they were eating seaweed.
Because they were eating seaweed. I love that. Yeah, how so? How so?
It was ordinarily used. It has been ever since the Stone Age. Those people were brought of the devil because they were eating seaweed and other herbs, wild herbs.
It kind of makes sense from an outside view that Christians would have seen the Vikings as somewhat evil for their knowledge of these plants and their healing properties. Furthermore, what I've noticed in researching this is that the folk names correspond to what he's saying, since, you know, you have the laminaria that we've been talking about. These kelp can be called either Venus's girdle or sea belt, right? The sea belt could have just been a deity like Ager in its place at one point, just a word for the sea in different languages. But then it took on the name of Devil's Apron. So you can clearly see where a god's name may have been displaced. What once was Venus's girdle is now the devil's girdle, right? And the reason it's usually a clue when you see a devil in a folk name that it once was a heathen deity is because these things were literally defined the same. All heathen deities were labeled devils, and that's definitely something that's been reflected in the ethnoflora of all different cultures. Speaking of devils, I just have to mention the most feared creature to ever roam Scotland's Northern Isles. The Knucklevi emerges from the sea, bringing death and disease. People are translating Knucklevi to devil of the sea. The devil part actually originates from Norse words for water spirits, I'm pretty sure, but it took on some of the attributes of Odin, like it has one eye. The Knucklevi was known for going into a diabolical rage if he smelled people burning seaweed. So as you can probably tell, there are a lot of examples across Europe of seaweed being associated with otherworldly beings. Here's another example from the Celtic Ranch website where it says, the word Slovak, nori, laver, or slok, also refers to the resilient mix of tough dermal bone and keratinized cells that form on the inside of an animal horn. Because of the potency of seaweed, the word can also refer to a mysterious otherworldly being. It's used in the phrase meaning, may the devil take him, expressions meaning, let him go to the devil, or he can go to blazes. Literally translates as, let him have the seaweed. To offer my 2 cents worth is literally to put my oar into the seaweed.
The legend is that the people in Wales learned to make this laver bread, and it is not bread. Laver is popular, and there are many kinds of popular seaweed. But they cooked to pasta, and they call it laver bread. And they eat it in the morning with bacon and eggs, and sometimes they also add some flour. This has been done ever since the time of the Vikings in Wales, and it is still being done the day today.
It's interesting to juxtapose what I was just saying about the Celtic phrases connecting seaweed to going with the devil, and also how a lot of these seaweed eating traditions may have been brought to the Celtic world by the Vikings. According to legend, at least, maybe these were the devils that were promoting this stuff. But surely not all sea spirits were diabolical, like the Tangi, the Shupalti, or the Knucklevi, right? So I thought I'd end this video with a milder example of a pagan-esque annual ceremony that used to take place on the Isle of Lewis, also in Scotland. People would pour a cup of ale into the sea in the hopes that the spirit Shoni would guarantee a good supply of seaweed in the coming year. So it's sort of amusing how people would leave church to do this. They'd go honor a pagan water deity for a good seaweed harvest. That shows it was like pretty important to these people, right? So to sum this all up, there are numerous folk names for seaweed: Venus's girdle, sea staff, sea belt, maybe even Balder locks and bloody hair. And I'm not claiming to have any clue why seaweed would refer to Balder. Maybe it's some long-lost tale of him jumping in the water after going fishing with his brother Thor, or maybe it's just due to the healing properties of the seaweed and the fact that the Norse use it as food. We may never know for sure, but it is certainly a point of intrigue. So what are your thoughts? Why in Helheim do you think Ilaria esculenta would be called Balder's locks? I really hope I'm correct. I have a biased love for the sea and all that kind of folklore. So this is just a theory. There's really no proving it, and I'm very curious what you guys think. And if you haven't already, please click that notification bell, the subscription button, or leave me a comment down below. If you don't like and subscribe, I am fairly certain that the Knucklevi will come and devour your soul. If not, then I probably will. So click there or beware, scallywags. All joking aside, thank you for watching.